It's January 2026 and I'm standing on the site of an ancient Bronze Age hill fort high above the Sussex seaside retirement resort of Worthing. Nestled between the chalk ridge of the South Downs and the shingle beach of the English Channel coastline, Worthing rose from mackerel fishing hamlet to elegant Georgian seaside resort, but as the tourists drifted away to the sunnier beaches of the Spanish costas and Greek islands, faded in its grandeur, overshadowed by always flashier and more boisterous Brighton, just 11 miles east along the coast. Sat almost halfway between Brighton and Chichester, today the town of Worthing is the second largest component of the Brighton and Hove built-up area that stretches as a continuous string of development from Brighton Marina and the White Hawk Estate in the east for nearly 20 miles to Littlehampton in the west. With around 1 in 3 residents of the two counties of East and West Sussex living in this area, it makes up the second largest conurbation on either side of the English Channel, or La Manche, only being pipped by nearby conurbines Southampton and Portsmouth. For a long time, the image of Worthing has been of somewhere that people retire to, and that's still evident in a significant number of care homes dotted in the larger houses in the complex network of roads heading back from the seafront to the railway station. But since the turn of the millennium, the population aged over 65 years is reduced by 8.1%, though the average age of a resident in Worthing is still 3.2 years older than the UK average, coming in at 42.8 years against the UK's 39.6. Up on the downs above the modern town, the history of the area goes back at least 6,000 years, but the first signs of any habitation down at coastal level is from the Romano-British period, where there's evidence for farmstead in the area that is today occupied by the town hall. The area became part of the Kingdom of Sussex shortly after a retreat of the Roman Empire, and the name Worthing is believed to date from this time. Worthing remained a fishing and agricultural hamlet for centuries until the 1750s, when the craze for sea bathing started to grip the nation. Perhaps inspired by her elder brother's dalliances and palace building along the coast in Brighton, Princess Amalia, the youngest daughter of George III, the Mad One, stayed in Worthing in 1798. Oscar Wilde holidayed in the town in both 1893 and 94, writing the importance of being earnest during the latter visit, and during the 20th century the town was home to playwright Harold Pinter. Both may have partaken in that very English of seaside practices, a stroll out along the pier, with the Worthing Pier first opening on the 12th of April 1862. Originally 960 foot, 290 metres long, and 15 foot, 4.6 metres wide when it was built, the pier was upgraded in 1888, doubling the width to 30 foot, 9.1 metres along most of its length, widening out to 105 foot, 32 metres at the end to accommodate the construction of a 650-seat pavilion. Originally built as a pleasure pier, it took on an additional role as a landing stage when steamship operations began between Worthing and Brighton in 1894. As with so many other piers in Britain, Worthing's pier has suffered damage on a number of occasions. In a storm on Easter Monday 1913, the southern end of the structure was cut off from the land and for a while was referred to as Easter Island until a rebuilt pier opened in May of the following year. Just 19 years later, in September 1933, most of the pier was destroyed in a fire, after which the pier was rebuilt in Art Deco style, reopening in 1935, and that's largely the pier that stands to today. With fears of the Nazis using piers as landing stages for an invasion following the retreat from Dunkirk, all of the piers for the south coast of Britain were sectioned, in Worthing's case by blowing a 120-foot hole in the pier with explosives. It wasn't until after the end of World War II that repairs were made to the structure to return it to use. At the land end of the pier is the Pavilion Theatre, and in the middle is the original Art Deco amusement arcade. The southern pavilion at the sea end has served many roles, including as a cafe, dance hall, home to a model railway layout, and as a nightclub, imaginatively called The Pier. The nightclub operated from 2007, but by 2014 the space had been turned into a tea room. Following major renovation in 2021, the pavilion is, as of January 2026, home to a restaurant and bar which on a blustery winter's afternoon would probably have been a warmer place to be inside of rather than taking video outside of it. From 2008 until 2015, the end of the pier was the literal jumping-off point for the International Birdman competition, where competitors attempted to take flight off the end of the pier. Sadly, the competition was held for the final time in its spiritual home of Bognor Regis in 2016, though given the wonderful job Southern Water have done in pumping raw sewage into the English Channel in recent years, it's probably for the best to avoid a return to very Georgian cholera and dysentery outbreaks. Almost next door to the pier is the Lido. The structure was originally opened on the 1st of August 1925 as the town's new bandstand, replacing an earlier bandstand that had stood on the same site. In 1957, the site became a Lido, offering a bathing place that didn't require a lengthy walk out for water's edge at low tide or the threat of being pummeled against the shingle in heavy waters. The Lido remained in operation until 1988 when the pool was paved over and the structure was converted into a small children's amusement park with an attached amusement arcade, gift shops and cafe. The large shingle beach runs all the way from the mouth of the Ado at Shoreham Harbour, uninterrupted for 13 miles to the mouth of the Arun in Littlehampton, though only the top part of the beach is shingle, with, at low tide, a very wide grey sand beach also being exposed. Located about a mile and a quarter west of the pier, on the edge of the town centre, almost in neighbouring Goring by sea, are the Marine Gardens. The gardens were first laid out in the 1930s, reflected in the Art Deco design of the buildings and surrounding area. Along with a now out-of-use putting green, a bowls green and formal gardens, there's also a water garden dominated by the modern fountain, which was installed in the early 2020s to update the site. 3.5 miles north of the town centre, on the chalk ridge of the South Downs, is the location of the first settlement in the area at Cissbury Ring. The highest point in the borough of Worthing, human interaction on the site dates back around 6,000 years, when the area was the centre of flint mining on the island, with 4 of the 14 known flint mines of Great Britain lying within 7 miles of the centre of Worthing. The flint mine at Cissbury had around 270 mine shafts, with some extending up to 39 feet 12 metres deep, and all dug using tools made from bone or the antlers of a local red deer. The site probably wasn't just a mine. It's speculated that it had a sacred or ritualistic meaning to the Neolithic people living in the area. Graffiti or art scratched into chalk at Cissbury are arguably some of the earliest examples of Neolithic art in Britain. The early Bronze Age saw the site being used as a burial ground, with 2 round barrows having been identified on the site. During the Iron Age, the hill took on a defensive purpose as it was turned into the second largest hill fort in Britain, the largest being Maiden Castle near Dorchester in Dorset. The ditches and ramparts that make up the fortifications enclose an area of around 65 acres, about a quarter of a square kilometre. It's likely that the fortification was in use for around 300 years, from 400 BCE. With its role as a fort ending, the area inside the ramparts was used for agricultural purposes, with rectangular fields marked out within the earthworks. The site continued to be used during the Roman occupation, with evidence of a settlement during the later Roman period inside the enclosure. After the departure of the Romans, it's likely the ramparts were heightened in fears of Danish Viking attacks. The discovery of 2 successive issues of coinage struck between 1009 and 1023 suggests that there may have been a mint on the site at this time. Cissbury, along with many other high points on the south coast, formed part of the Tudor-era early warning system of beacons that ran along the south coast. From here, watchers would have been able to monitor 78 miles of coastline. On a clear day, it's possible to see all the way from Beachy Head at the easternmost end of the South Downs, just outside modern-day Eastbourne, all the way west to the Isle of Wight and the important naval port of Portsmouth, home and final resting place of King Henry VIII's Tudor flagship, the Mary Rose. It wasn't until the second half of the 19th century that archaeological investigations into the hill got underway. In 1857, George Irving carried out the first of many digs that were conducted during the Victorian era. His initial focus was on an isolated hollow on the southeast side of the hill fort and 9 pits in the area of the flint mines. In one of these pits he found charcoal, oyster shells, animal bones and pottery dating to both the Roman period and the 16th century. A decade later, a team led by Colonel August Lane Fox, better known as Pit Rivers, excavated 30 pits in 2 separate digs in late 1867 and early 1868. During this time, they found large numbers of flint axes and other tools, more animal bones, charcoal and shells, and more importantly for the history of the site, Neolithic pottery. In 1873, one of Pit River's pits was reopened and excavated down to a depth of 4.2 metres, which led to the discovery of a shaft with a number of galleries radiating from it and several ox shoulder blades which may have been used as shovels. Further digs confirmed that this had been the location of the flint mine. The Second World War wasn't kind to the site of its prominence above the coast, calling it into service as a location for anti-aircraft guns. In 1940, a large anti-tank ditch was excavated around the entire hill. In the build-up to the Normandy landings of D-Day, the hill was used in military exercises in preparation for the invasion of Europe, and at the time, observation dugouts were excavated in the rampart to house machine gun posts. After the war in the 1950s, further excavations came across the grisly discovery of the remains of a young woman, likely killed in a tunnel collapse. Radiocarbon dating put the remains at around 3700 BCE. Today, the whole site is in the care of the National Trust, who've worked to repair some of the damage caused to the site during the 20th century, including the clearing of invasive plant life and the overall clearing of vegetation, with the latter left for a small team of New Forest ponies who live up on the ring all year round. Through the work of the ponies, the land has returned to that of the chalk grassland that it historically would have been, one of the rarest habitats in the UK. Cissbury Ring is completely open to explore, allowing you to walk around the whole of the site, including the enclosure, along the top of the ramparts and around the edge, both inside and outside of the earthworks. Just over 3.5 miles to the southwest of Cissbury sits another, albeit smaller, Iron Age hillfort at the top of Highdown Hill. While Cissbury reaches a height of 604 foot, 184 metres, Highdown tops out at just 266 foot, 81 metres, but is much closer to the coast, being just over 1.75 miles from the coastline. Much like Cissbury, Highdown is today owned by the National Trust and has a similar range of views in good weather from Seven Sisters near Beachy Head to the Isle of Wight. During the 18th century, local eccentric miller John Oliver had his own tomb built on the hill some 27 years before his eventual death. There is speculation that rather than being eccentric, this was a cover for the fact that he may have been the leader of a local gang of smugglers and used the tomb as a covert store for contraband. It's alleged that he would set the sails of his windmill to different angles to indicate the absence of customs men to his gang out at sea. The tomb, though, did eventually serve its correct purpose, with John being buried in it following his death in 1793. There's no evidence of any Neolithic mining activity at Highdown, though later chalk extraction has eaten away at the side of the hill. The first human activity on the site is significantly later than neighbouring Cissbury, with the first occupation only being around 3,000 years ago, when enclosure was built during the late Bronze Age. Around 400 years later, this had been replaced by a small hill fort comprised of a single rampart and ditch, much of which survives to today. About a millennia later, an Anglo-Saxon cemetery was created on the site, and the hill has been the traditional burial place of the kings of Sussex who ruled the local area from shortly after the collapse of the Roman Empire until Sussex came under control of Offa of Mercia in the early 770s. The cemetery was only discovered by accident when local landowner Edwin Henty undertook tree planting inside the hill fort, unearthing glass objects and then the graves. It's thought that a significant number of artefacts may have been discarded as trash before full excavation could be undertaken. Formal excavations were carried out in 1893 and 1894, during which 86 Anglo-Saxon graves were uncovered. As with Cissbury, the hill was pressed into action during the Second World War, becoming home to a radar station, which, during its construction, caused significant damage to the archaeology of the fort. Further damage was caused during the Great Storm of 1987, which uprooted large numbers of trees, exposing the land underneath. A rescue dig to record the exposed archaeology was carried out in 1988. Today, the site is in the care of the National Trust and, like Cissbury, is fully open to the public. Not all of the hill has been preserved, and for a number of years part of the hill was used as a chalk pit, with the chalk quarried away from the hillside, creating an industrial scar on the side of Highdown Hill. The now exhausted chalk pit and surrounding land were purchased by Sir Frederick Stern in 1909, and he spent the following 50 years working on the 8.52-acre site to show that plants could grow in the unfavourable conditions of poor and highly alkaline thin soil above the chalk. In 1919, he married Sybil Lucas, and she worked alongside him to develop the gardens. Sir Frederick Claude Stern was born in 1884 into a wealthy merchant banking family, so was able to pursue his passion of botany and horticulture, though he was also involved in politics. His active work on the gardens took a back seat during World War I, when he served with the 2nd Company of the London Yeomanry in both Gallipoli and Palestine, receiving the Military Cross in 1917 and rising to the rank of colonel. During the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, he was Private Secretary to the British Prime Minister David Lloyd George. During the Second World War, he became Group Commander of the West Sussex Home Guard, many ranks above any local Captain Mannering. The gardens were created at a time when expeditions were heading to China and the Himalayas to collect rare plants, and many of the earliest collections that still survive to today in the gardens come from these expeditions. Sir Frederick passed away at the age of 83 in 1967, and following his wishes, Lady Stern left the garden to Worthing Borough Council, who look after and maintain the gardens as a free-to-visit site to today. Worthing sits on the West Coastway line with services east to Hove and Brighton and west to Littlehampton, Portsmouth and Southampton. It also has half-hourly services to Hove, Gatwick Airport and London Victoria, with journeys taking around 90 minutes to central London and 50 minutes to Gatwick. London Gatwick Airport is the UK's 2nd largest airport and the largest base for low-cost carrier EasyJet, as well as a hub for British Airways, Wizz Air, TUI and Jet2, providing a dense network of links across Europe, as well as to North America, Africa, the Middle East, Far East and Southeast Asia.